If you have big reactions to a lot of things throughout your day, and that's causing you to argue with your wife, with your kids, if that stress is impacting the relationships that you care the most about, this video is for you. And I want to share a quick story of mine to kind of illustrate how this may have evolved. But one thing that I want to say at the beginning is that I think a lot of people are quick to blame the circumstances, the traffic, the email, the water bill, the thing that their family member said. And I think that that's normal. I think it is very common for people to say, hey, this thing happened, it's justified why I responded, why I reacted the way that I did. I fell into that trap for a very long time, and I'll tell you, it did me no good at all. This video is actually part of a broader series that I'm putting out for guys who might not be aware of how their emotional patterns are actually keeping them stuck. And I'm making this video series because this actually impacted me the most, because I found myself working so ridiculously hard when I was in my 20s. And I had this relationship with stress that just didn't serve me. I kind of had this idea that I just needed to grind and work harder and that things would magically take care of themselves, that I just needed to put more hours in, 40, 50, 60, whatever hours per week, just make more money, and then the stress would magically go away, and then things would be good. But that's just not the case, because our relationship with stress has never been healthy in the first place. So here's a story that I want to share. When I was 18, maybe 19 years old at this point, I'm not really sure, I was in the Marine Corps Reserves. But the first 6 months look more or less similar for any Marine. So for Marines east of the Mississippi, they go to a place called Camp Lejeune or Camp Geiger. So because my job was infantry, I stayed at that place for a little bit longer. And at the end of that school, we had to do this really difficult assignment. There was a series of tests, but essentially you build up to something called a 20K ruck. So a 20K ruck is a hike in the middle of the woods. I think we started around like 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And since I was a machine gunner, all this was being done with the receiver of a Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher across my shoulders. I don't say this because it was really cool. It actually sucked. It was very difficult. It was also freezing. You don't really sleep a lot the night before. You don't really eat a lot. You don't really have time to drink a lot of water to stay hydrated. People might look at that and say, hey, you're really disciplined for doing that. That was a really impressive thing to do physically. And those accolades sound cool. And I think that a lot of people outside of the military are quick to kind of award those accolades and say, hey, that was a really impressive thing that got done. But really, when you boil it down, all that 20K was, and every assignment before and after that, was really just for one purpose, and that was survival. The 20K ruck was representative of if we did get deployed, and I didn't, by the way, it was representative of tasks and assignments that would need to get done if we were actually in the field. So fast forward a couple of years, now I'm a civilian, I'm a counselor, that's my day job, I'm actually on my way into work right now. Doing a 20K ruck, with or without the receiver, obviously you can't get your hands on a grenade launcher in the civilian world, it wouldn't serve a purpose. What used to be a very vital exercise to see if Marines were fit or equipped to survive in the field no longer applies to the next stage of life. How you respond to stress, how you react to things is very similar. It is very likely that your stress responses, your overreactions, are outdated survival software. So it's worth exploring how that evolved over time, why it started, and how you keep it in place now that you're an adult. So we're not going to go full Freud here. This is not a therapy session, but it is worth kind of examining and putting a magnifying glass up to certain parts of your childhood and adolescence. And I say that because your habits, your emotional habits, have a long history of survival baked into them. What that means is when you were a kid or an adolescent or whatever, your strong reactions served a purpose. They helped you survive in some capacity. Maybe your strong reactions were a way to kind of ward people off because nobody gave you space unless you kind of exploded. Maybe lashing out or having a big outburst or having a big strong reaction to something was actually a way to get attention because maybe your parents didn't naturally, organically give you that kind of attention that you sought out. So those big reactions were actually adaptive to help you build a connection with your parents. Maybe things were very unpredictable in your house growing up. So when you had a strong reaction, an overreaction, that was actually a way to exert control or certainty over your household. More importantly is you just identifying the theme, the pattern, that at some point in your life, those strong reactions served a purpose, they were adaptive, they helped you get your psychological needs met. Now here's the kind of tricky part. If you pan out 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it is, maybe you haven't had the awareness to go back and update that software. So now the reactions that would once buy you attention or buy you a little bit of space in your household, now those same reactions actually cause the thing that you don't want to happen in the first place. Now those big reactions that once served the purpose, now they actually cause strain in your relationship. Now they actually make you feel more disconnected from your kids. So on the one hand, we can kind of understand how this evolved as a survival strategy. And now we can also say that two things can be true at once, that now where you are in your life, they no longer serve you. So before we go on to the next part, which is how to break that cycle, it might be worth noting now, just kind of like taking a catalog, going through your history in your mind to kind of examine like, what did that reaction, what did those strong reactions, what purpose did they serve? At what point in your childhood? At what point in your young adulthood? What did you get out of having those big stress responses? In the same way where I don't start my day off with a 20K ruck because that survival strategy no longer applies to my civilian life, now it's time to find more adaptive ways to get through, to get our needs met on a day-to-day basis. And what's really worth noting here is that your brain is absolutely capable of doing this. That's evidenced by something called neuroplasticity, which means that your brain continues to change its entire life. So more than just how do we interpret something like neuroplasticity, how do we operationalize it? How do we actually put it into action? Now that you know it, all you got to do is break the pattern. Like, you don't need to continuously search for more knowledge and more theories. It's not as complicated as people make it out to be. I used to be a personal trainer, and what I would say is that once you learn the fundamentals, it's just a matter of executing, and that's really what the case is now. Now that you know your brain is willing to change, that you can upend those unhealthy stress responses and replace them with better ones, now it's just a matter of finding the access points. Here's a good example. If you get home and then your wife or your kids or somebody else, it doesn't have to just be a family member, if somebody says something that kind of triggers you, you get like an intense, sharp reaction. All you need to do is some combination of taking a breath or going for a walk. You just need to put space between your initial reaction and your behavior. So let's summarize the 2 points. You have outdated survival software that doesn't actually serve you. In fact, it harms your relationships and harms your sense of dignity. The second point is that it is absolutely changeable with awareness and repeated action. So I'll be putting out more videos like this, but if this resonates, if you're trying to figure out why do I do what I do? Why do I know what to do, but I can't seem to get out of this cycle? Check out the description or head on over to my bio. There's going to be a link to my website called the 7 Profiles Assessment. And what that is it's a breakdown of the 7 most common psychological profiles. It's not everything, it's not meant to be exhaustive or comprehensive, but it is a good starting point for you to figure out, what is my profile? Why do I do what I do? Last thing, I'll have my email below if you just want to reach out directly and share with me how some of your strong reactions show up in your daily life.